Now, joining me in the studio is the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. Hello, thank you for being with us. Before we move on to the other issues, I'm quite keen to get your thoughts on the report we just watched about anti-semitism within the Labour Party, or allegations of it. And I was really struck when speaking to some of the Jewish community that they feel almost a sense of personal betrayal, that Labour is a party that they felt allied to for many decades.
It was their party.
Yeah, it was their party, and now they feel that that's changed. Do you think they have a point?
It's a tragedy. It's absolute tragedy. I could weep about it. I really could, because I've spoken to a number of those people as well. And the other tragedy is we're now led by someone who's possibly one of the most foremost anti-racist campaigners that we've had in our political history. His parents met, Jeremy Corbyn's parents met in the Cable Street campaign, which was to defend the Jewish community against the fascists. So I think we've got to open the dialogue again and overcome these problems. And I believe our party, and I don't believe in being complacent about this. I believe our party is still the anti-racist party that I joined. I think there's anti-Semitism in our community, and it will pervade all our institutions, and we've got to root it out. The shock for me is the figures last year: 1,300 anti-Semitic incidents, hate crimes reported across our whole community. Now, Labour should be at the forefront of confronting that. Instead, we're involved in this internal examination and exploration of what's been going on in the last 12 months around Ken Livingstone. We've got to close that down and move on.
With Ken Livingstone, and I'm interested in your own personal view here, not the sort of party line.
I understand.
Do you think he should have been expelled from the party?
Look, Ken Livingstone, last year, I made it clear to him he should have apologised immediately.
And he didn't. He went on and repeated.
And I was quite angry about that. I've known Ken. I was his deputy on the GRC. We've worked together. We've fallen out a number of times as well. But I'm always straight with him. He should have apologised. This came about because my parliamentary private secretary, Naz Shah, made a statement which was appalling about sending Jews from Israel to America. I immediately asked her to stand down, and she did. What did she do? She apologised immediately, realised the mistake that she'd made and was shocked by it, apologised immediately, met the Jewish community, and has been applauded since for learning the lesson. That's what I want Ken to do. There's a thing within the Jewish faith that was transferred into the Christian religion, which is honest contrition, followed by forgiveness and reconciliation. That's what I wanted to happen. That's what I want to happen now, quite honestly.
So I'm still a bit unclear, though. Do you think he should have been expelled? Because he hasn't apologised, has he?
I think people are surprised at what happened out of the hearings that took place. I'd like to know what legal advice was provided. What will now happen is that the NEC will consider this matter again, and there'll be further consideration of the matter. I'm not saying anything now that will prejudge that or prejudice what will come out of it. Okay. But my advice to Ken again, and I say this as an old ally of his, apologise. This argument about historical fact is not the issue. The issue is you deployed it to justify what was an anti-Semitic statement by Naz Shah. Just apologise now. And I tell you, Jewish members of the community will accept contrition and will forgive and move on. But until we get some form of apology, I don't think we can. And the behaviour of the last week, it's hard to come to terms with. We've got to get out there as a party now campaigning against racism in our society. Anti-Semitism on the rise, which is appalling, but also only a month ago, a few weeks ago, 30 people pounced upon a young asylum seeker and nearly kicked him to death. Our party should be leading the campaign to tackle racism in our society, and we've been diverted into this, and we've got to re-establish our credentials as an anti-racist party.
Now, moving on, I'm keen to get your views on the other really pressing issue this week, which is Syria. We've seen the Defence Secretary coming out today to say Russia is responsible by proxy for the 87 deaths in that chemical attack in Syria. Is he right?
Well, what we should have had immediately, rather than Trump going to bombing, we should have an immediate inquiry about the use of sarin gas again by
But is Russia responsible, do you think?
Well, I think Russia has a role to play because they've propped up the Assad regime all the way through. But the only way I think we're going to get rid of Assad is what was happening before the bombing, which was actually for the first time the US and Russia beginning to build a relationship in which a strategy around Syria could be developed. The bombing, I think, has set that back. What should have happened is a proper inquiry under UN auspices, then a debate within the UN, and then the UN used then to develop the strategy for peace, negotiate peace in Syria. And what we've got to do now from our country, from the UK, we can play a role in that by putting pressure on all sides now to get back to the Geneva talks.
You talk about the UN. Everyone, of course, would love to see some kind of UN resolution agreement going forward. But let's get real. It's not going to happen, is it? Russia's already vetoed 7 resolutions.
Certainly, it's not immediately.
It's not fit for
no,
purpose,
it isn't. Immediately, it isn't. But it's bizarre. This Trump and Putin relationship that was developing could have enabled us, I think, to step back from the bombing rather than immediately bomb, then actually have a proper inquiry and drawn Russia in. Because I actually think there's no way we'll get rid of Assad unless there's Russian agreement. And I think the potential there has been destroyed as a result of this bombing.
Now, in response to those US airstrikes that were launched, we've had some rather different, shall we say, responses from some people within your own party.
Yeah,
the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, welcomed it as a direct and proportionate response. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader, said it risks intensifying a multi-sided conflict. Which side are you on?
Jeremy's, because I believe that there shouldn't have been bombing.
So was Tom Watson wrong then?
Well, I think he was, but look, Tom's disagreed with us on the bombing of Syria all the way through. We had a free vote last year, and he took a different view, and I respect that view. I don't condemn him or anything like that. I respect it, but it's a different view from both mine and Jeremy's and others within the party. We believe that bombing was precipitous. There should have been a proper investigation. There should have been, hopefully then, the start of the Geneva talks once again. This may have set us back. I'm hoping it hasn't, but the talks have got to start soon. We will not get a settlement in Syria as a result of bombing. We'll get it as a negotiated settlement at some stage. And if we can bring Russia on side in due course, that means a settlement without Assad.
It's very hopeful, isn't it? So
it is.
We'll bring Russia on side.
It is, but at the same time, what you've got to do is judge every step so you do not alienate potential allies for the future. The bombing, I think, has set us back. I think it was precipitous, and I think it could have been handled with more care, certainly because of the Trump new relationship with Putin that was developing.
Now, the bombing, though, was a direct response to a deadly chemical weapons attack that killed 87 people, including children, which was absolutely appalling, as you say. I mean, I'm just trying to rack my brains and think of any time when Labour would be prepared to intervene. Because at the moment it feels as though there's almost no point having an army if there was a Labour government.
No, I'm not a pessimist. We're not a pacifist party. But what you have to do...
So when would intervention be right?
Well, you have to take a judgment about when physical force is necessary. And you've got to exhaust every other avenue. Here's the tragedy today. America is bombed as a result of the use of gas. And yet Syria, Assad is bombing again today with barrel bombs again. So actually it hasn't stopped the bombing. In fact, it might have actually put off the opportunity of negotiated settlement. My view is there should have been a time for a proper inquiry. The results of that inquiry properly exposed, negotiations and back to Geneva. I think there was potential there. We've got to get back to that. That's why I think actually Boris Johnson should be in Moscow now. I think he should be there saying...
So he was wrong then?
I think he was. I think he should be in Moscow now saying to the Russians just how appalling the situation is and the role that they should play. We've got to be frank with them, and we shouldn't just allow the Americans to go off and do that. We should be doing that ourselves.
Do you think that he's effectively bound to pressure from America then?
I don't know. We need to ask him that, and he needs to be honest with us about that as well, and they need to be straightforward. But look, we shouldn't be basically being directed by America, but whether we are or not, he should be there making the case to Russia, just condemning them, of course, but then also saying the proof in whether or not they're serious about future peace is back to Geneva in the talks. He should be saying that on our behalf firmly.
Now, local elections are looming.
Yeah.
Labour's polling is, let's be blunt, pretty terrible at the moment. Let's have a look at... Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm just being told that we don't have the graphics screen. Always very smooth running here, as always. But what I was going to say is that last week, Jeremy Corbyn said to a reporter, when asked about his leadership, it's your responsibility to make sure the opposition voice is heard. It's your failings. Do you think the media is to blame for Labour being 20 points behind in the poll? What
Jeremy was saying was, look, the media should now report us accurately and report us fairly. There's been a number of independent reports.
You said it quite forcefully, it's your fault.
I know. That's
failing.
because he was interrupted so often, and actually no one was actually talking about the real issues. And we had an audience there who were getting up, asking real questions about what's happening in schools, closure of Sure Start centres by the Conservatives, the loss of 50,000 teachers last year. Those serious issues were being raised, and all, unfortunately, all the number of reporters were talking about was Jeremy Corbyn standing in the polls. And what he quite rightfully said is, let's talk about the real issues that concern people.
But if you want to deal with those real issues, you have to improve your standing, don't you?
Of course we do. And remember, when Jeremy took over, we were 12 to 14 points behind in the polls.
The polls?
And then,
the polls.
yes.
So there was one poll, I think it was, or was it? It wasn't.
No.
What are you saying, that there was seriously saying that the average of the polls?
No, what I'm saying is, before he took over, we were well behind in the polls as well. In his first 6 months, actually, we got to the situation we were either just behind or virtually level with the Tories. And then we had another leadership election, yet again. I'm hoping they're not becoming annual, let's put it that way. Another leadership election, and people won't vote for a party that looks divided. So what we're saying to our own party, we've got to unite, and we've got to present a united front, because the issues we're raising, what's interesting, when you poll the issues in our policies, they're extremely popular. So what's preventing people translating that into strength in the polls? And it's partly because they see us as divided. So if we unite, which I think we are doing now, a number of issues, particularly around Brexit, you'll see us rise in the polls.
Now, one last question. I'm interested to get your answer on this. When you were first appointed Shadow Chancellor, I think people were expecting a kind of radical manifesto. It hasn't quite worked out like that, has it? In fact, some of your policies are almost to the right of Ed Miliband. So what's happened? Is the socialist firebrand being tamed?
What's happened is that I've engaged in one of the biggest engagement processes with our members and with the electorate of the last 12 months, listening to them, talking to them about the real issues.
So have you tamed your views in order to reflect what others think?
No, sorry, let me finish. What I'm saying is I've been touring around the country for the last 18 months, listening to people, what their ideas are, floating some of the ideas that we've got, and preparing, I think, extremely radical programme. You'll see that rolled out in the next few months, and I believe, actually, it won't just be radical, but it will demonstrate, actually, the popularity of it as well.
OK.
And you just look at what happened last week when we suggested free school meals, and I'd pay for them by VAT on school fees.
That's just an extension of what the coalition's policy was.
Well, it was radical in the sense that we're implementing it on the basis of a redistribution of wealth, and that's what it is. And that's what we're about. As a party, what we're about is the redistribution of wealth and power from those that basically are the richest in our country, the most powerful, to the rest of the people. That's the radical programme you'll be seeing rolled out between now and the next election.
OK, radical programme to come. John McDonnell, thank you very much.